we've there's been a tremendous amount of talk and investment in AI from the private and public sectors. We've seen a number of AI backed attacks happen globally. AI empowered malware, DDoS that just grow the scale and efficiency of threat actors coming from both nation states and criminal organizations. But the area that is certainly going to be empowered or improved over the coming years is the ability for attackers to use AI to improve social engineering, deepfakes especially. And we've spoken offline and outside of this conversation here about the history of social engineering. So I'd love to sort of set the scene with the opener there, Alex, around maybe what is social engineering, how has it developed over time? What are your thoughts there?
Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me on stage and being part of this prestigious conference. Social engineering goes back many, many years before the dawn of time, really. So social engineering is about taking advantage of human nature in order to get a certain desired result. Social engineering is all around us. It's in marketing, it's in politics, it's certainly very much in politics today. Social engineering as we know it today really came about with the development of the telephone and how frauds have come, unfortunately, to with telephone banking. How technology, whilst it's wonderful, it's also been a massive enabler for fraud. So we first started seeing 15, 20 years ago, as people started doing more with banking, we started to understand the value of information. And obviously with the advent of social media, each of us are putting out a huge amount of personal data on a daily basis. And of course, as companies, we're putting out a huge amount of data, thousands and thousands of data points every month through normal activities, through the use of LinkedIn, through marketing, and through the news. So unfortunately now we're in a situation where social engineering has developed such a speed, really. Psychology behind it has always remained the same, but how it's now leveraged is a real concern.
Yeah, I think the amount of information that people put out on social media, it can be aggregated and screen scraped at such a fast manner now that people know your job, your family, where you live. All of that information can be used, leveraged, and integrated into a social engineering attack, right? And especially for senior leaders, the C-suite that are typically targeted by bigger organized groups. Those people have the most information, on social media or in generic media. So it's I suppose the scale and speed is something that's growing exponentially. One thing I want to pick up on, you've mentioned psychology quite a bit, the psychological, mechanisms that attackers use and the psychological, I would say, weaknesses that people haven't changed. It's remained constant. So how has that translated as, tools have evolved into the modern age?
I think the concern with how it's developed, we need to look at how we communicate really with each other, and our sort of need for communication and mass communication. Our culture hasn't really changed and hasn't really caught up. If we all look at our individual organizations, we all have our own individual cultures of how we greet each other in the morning, how we share information, our appetite for security within our own organizations. And that's very different, not just on an organizational level, but also on an international level. So some cultures, for instance, are more susceptible to social engineering because they wish to please. Certainly in the Far East, there is a culture where they wish to be more subservient. They wish to serve you. They wish to please you. So very often they'll be giving up information where in Western culture or Middle Eastern culture you wouldn't necessarily find that. We find that we're more susceptible to challenging when questions are being asked, or thinking first and not putting out that information.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the psychological or cognitive biases we all have haven't changed throughout history. You know, when people make decisions, you either think, you know, consciously or subconsciously. And if an attacker targets you at a period of time in your life where you're under stress and there's, you know, you're juggling different things, then you're more likely to react subconsciously. And if, you know, there is an element of stress or speed in that request, people do typically, you know, they respond quickly and they don't think about what they're doing. So you may share information or click on a phishing email or whatnot. So, you know, there's a bunch of innate psychological weaknesses that it doesn't matter if this is happening face to face. It could happen virtually, digitally, online, on the phone. And that kind of brings me on quite nicely to the digital element that I'd like to explore with you, Alex, because, you know, we've seen so many deepfake attacks happen recently, the Arab deepfake incident making the headlines recently. Could you walk us through what happened there and why deepfakes, and especially that case, is so significant?
Sure. So the Arab case is quite important because it's a bit of a milestone case. I'll just sort of reel back a little bit. I just want to talk about rational choice theory. I don't know if many of you have heard of rational choice theory. Rational choice theory is a relatively new theory, we're about 30, 40 years old, where we have a triangle, which is the asset or the target. And then we have the capable guardian, we hope capable, and then we have a motivated offender. Now, rational choice theory is quite important if you study crime, and we can go on and we can talk about things like Swiss cheese theory, which we can use in hindsight to look at incidents. But sorry, Dan, I've forgotten the question there.
No, it's okay. So we were following on from psychology into the deepfake Arab incident.
Yeah, sorry. So the Arab incident is quite interesting. So the Arab are a large company, quite a well-developed company, quite mature with their security, their internal security practices. However, a group of criminals who are yet to be identified identified certain individuals within the company who made decisions in relation to accounts and who could potentially process payments quickly, on a nod, if you like. So they identified these individuals within the company, one particular individual, and they carried out their research over a long period of time on the company. They found out who the executives were, who would be able to make the decision and force the individual into making a decision so that he could make the payment very, very quickly. So what they did is they approached this individual, sent him an email, and straight away he was actually quite suspicious of this email because he was asked to look at making a payment to do with a secret deal that was going on within the company, and it was said that, you know, he was a trusted employee. Please could he, you know, jump on a Zoom call with the account executives, with the C-suite, and discuss this deal and then action some payments. So he basically went on a live Zoom call, was invited to a live Zoom call, and he went on this Zoom call with these executives. He recognized them. He'd worked with some of them previously. They told him that there was this secret deal going down and they wished him to release a number of payments. And of course, human nature. He wanted to please his employers. He thought he was doing the right thing. He trusted what he saw on the screen. This was live video, and they were engaging with him. These were moving pictures. This wasn't a picture of somebody and a voice he recognized. So, you know, we've now got to the stage with the aid of artificial intelligence where these types of attacks can be launched with research, with using social engineering techniques and intelligence gathering, where you can put together live video and manipulate it live in conversation, manipulating it in such a way that you're displaying an individual's mannerisms and their accent is correct, their voice is correct, everything about it is correct. So much so that this individual released 26 million US dollars over a period of a number of weeks. And only he thought he was doing the right thing. This guy thought he was doing his job. So, how do we combat that going forward? This is a really, really difficult subject. When we talk about the culture within our organizations, where is the capable guardian? Where is the oversight in things like this? How do we do it? We need to go back to the drawing board in many ways and look at 2, 3, and 4 factor authentication, because we need to row it back a bit. There's no other way really of combating this type of thing. It's getting quite serious now.
So when we think about, what on earth are we going to do about deepfakes? You've mentioned culture, training, and you mentioned some controls like 2-factor authentication, 3-factor authentication. Are there any other, techniques, tactics, strategies that you've seen in practice that would, mitigate the risks associated with deepfakes?
I think the major problem within organizations has got to be their own internal culture. As we know, if you try and put espionage onto the agenda within a boardroom, you're going to get laughed at. Most security professionals that I work with internationally struggle to get security on the agenda of a boardroom anyway. This needs to come top down from an organization. Education is the number one thing. Education doesn't really cost a lot. It doesn't really cost anything really within most large organizations, because they have to do personal development training anyway. So getting this, just educating people to the threat, and actually educating people also that it's okay to say no. It's okay to challenge. If when you take the Arab case, okay, this incident seemed a little bit out of the norm, how this is not how it's going to affect every company, SMEs. It's not going to affect them. They're not going to release 20 odd million pounds. To them, it might be a few £1,000. It might be a few £1 million. So we need to look at how we question things. Obviously, since COVID, we've changed the way we work. We're very remote. In the old days, you would, if you had a strange request, you might walk down the corridor and speak to one of your colleagues, and get a second look at something. So I think we need to start thinking about maybe how we're working and how we can work that into our policies and procedures.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to put yourself in the shoes of the attacker, I think, sometimes, and like, why is this person or organization using this deepfake? And it's typically to get a payment, or in some cases you see other government institutions or political activists trying to disrupt politics in some capacity. So building that into training and awareness activities is obviously really important. I like your point around the right level of controls, and I think if we focus specifically on payments, there should not be one person that could share multi-million-dollar deals without another set of eyes reviewing, validating that payment. That's a big gap, in my opinion.
Yeah, in a lot of organizations, they have these types of controls. They call it 4 eyes or 6 eyes, where other people have got to get to grips, with what they're being told to sign off. But I worry now that we're with deepfake and the advent of quantum computing, that we're going to be living in an age where we really can't trust anything. Recently I saw an advert for a product that was endorsed by Ivana Trump that was complete deepfake. And when we look at geopolitics, what if we get videos of our political leaders making adverse statements against other countries, or saying that there's a banking issue in India, or that there's a flood somewhere and people need to give aid. This is how geopolitical deep fakes are going to, unfortunately, shape our future.
Now, we've kind of spoken a little bit about, say, the internal organization that's experiencing deepfakes. And I've got a question here around supply chain vulnerabilities and how are deepfakes being used in supply chain fraud, and why is that such an urgent issue for, CISOs, CIOs, chief risk officers, in your opinion?
I think we're just seeing the start of this, to be honest, Dan. I think there's a lot of learning that we need to do in relation to supply chain fraud. I think geopolitical, putting out misinformation is probably the most damaging thing for supply chain fraud. Or actually, saying that there's a product recall, or saying that there's a defect with a product, or putting out misinformation about shortages of metals and things like that. I think, certainly when it comes to material science, if you start putting out misinformation on that using deep fake, we're going to end up in serious trouble, because everyone works on just in time. So if you can quite easily disrupt supply chains, using that, or even saying that there's a terrorist incident that's taken place, or a pirating incident that's taken place, which is going to affect shipping, or going to disrupt transportation, or make people delay things at the very least.
I mean, do you think there's a greater significance or dependence on, centralized government to, manage social media to an extent, the TikToks, the Instagrams of this world, where they have so much power in being able to scale rhetoric, opinions, misinformation that can impact organizations and the public. So, is there, maybe a government angle that you might want to focus on as well?
Yeah, I think any government worth their salt now needs to look at the regulation of social media, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I think we've got an epidemic, really. If you put something on social media today, especially a deep fake, a young person or an older person is gonna believe that straight away. We don't live, now we live in a world which is ultra connected, and this only going to get worse. And of course, we have to remember with social engineering and all the data points that are out there for us as individuals, with supercomputing, we can target the information that each individual receives. We already have that with Google advertising and the feeds you get on your Instagram and your Twitter, etc. That's tailored to you and your likes, whether whether you know it or not. So if you manipulate that further with inject deep fakes in it and your own political agenda, then this is the new reality.
So we've pretty much covered most of the angles here. I think we've covered the history, psychology, existing threat landscape. Where do you see this going next? In terms of AI enabled attacks, deep fakes. I know we're saying it's going to get worse, but could you contextualize that a little bit for us? What do you think is going to happen, especially in the Middle East?
Okay, if we roll back 30, 40 years, I was born in 1972, and in 1975, Gordon Moore came up with Moore's law, which was that basically computing power would double every 2 years. We've surpassed this. Moore's law is gone. It's non-existent now. We now live in a world where computers can learn for themselves, and soon they're not going to need us. Soon they will have their own agenda, and that's a scary thing. And the worst thing is, this technology is available to everyone. Yes, supercomputing it's here. Quantum computing is on the horizon, very close. And the moment that people can weaponize, whether it's in the Middle East or elsewhere, the moment this can be weaponized or used by organized crime, we're in some serious trouble. Because I believe this technology will run away with itself. We're going to be in some serious trouble now.
Okay. Nice, cheery, joyful finish to the the podcast there. look, to wrap up, what's the one message that you want security leaders and the audience here to take away about the evolving nature of AI and deception technologies?
I would say that people, your people, our people, whether it's security professionals or members of your HR team, everyone's role should involve security, no matter what they are. Security should be part of everyone's function. And I think if we can tell people that deep fake is out there and give people examples of it, then we can help combat it. But in relation to where we're going with quantum computing and deep fake, the only thing we can really do is hope for regulation, international regulation. The same way that we regulate nuclear weapons, we need this, and we need to be able to shut down systems. When there's suspicious activity, we need to be able to have that power, and I worry that power will be sentient and it will be self-managing unless we're very, very careful.
Okay, a lot covered there in 20 minutes. So thank you so much, Alex. Pleasure to share the stage with you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you, everyone.